The man injected bat blood into his own body. Something unexpected happened. He who was originally plagued by a blood disease actually underwent earth-shaking changes. He found that his body was gradually getting stronger. His originally thin body was now covered with muscles. He not only became incredibly strong, but also extremely agile in his movements. He could hang upside down in the air like a bat, and acquired the ability of echolocation. Even with his eyes closed, he could accurately determine the source of the sound, and the man who obtained these superpowers is named Morbius. He couldn't help but feel shocked. What on earth gave him such abnormal abilities? All of this has to start from when the man was a child. Morbius had been living in an orphanage since he could remember. He had been haunted by a rare blood disease since he was a child. Everything around him suggested that the hope of being cured was extremely slim. But the fire of survival in his heart never went out. In his little head, he always thought that one day he could find a way to defeat the disease. On a gloomy day, another boy named Milo came to the orphanage. The threads of fate were quietly intertwined. Milo actually suffered from the same blood disease as Morbius. There was something missing in both of their DNAs. It was like a jigsaw puzzle. Before it was found, in order to maintain their lives, they had to undergo 3 painful blood transfusions every day. The two people who shared the same suffering soon became the only light for each other in the darkness. Unexpectedly, just as the two were talking, Milo's medical equipment suddenly malfunctioned, causing him to fall into a coma instantly. Morbius was extremely anxious and shouted for the nurse. What responded to him was only the empty silence. At a critical moment, Morbius didn't hesitate at all and rushed forward. With his amazing intelligence, he miraculously repaired the equipment with just a spring from a ballpoint pen. At that moment, his high IQ talent was fully revealed, and this matter soon reached the ears of the director. The director knew very well that Morbius was a rare talent. He couldn't let his talent be buried, so he decided to recommend Morbius to study in an upscale college. He also thoughtfully promised to provide private care to control his illness. Morbius was full of reluctance to part with Milo in his heart, but he understood that there was a more important mission waiting for him in the distance, and the director also promised him that he would take good care of Milo, so he left a farewell letter full of affection, and resolutely embarked on an unknown journey. Although the two had a good relationship, their personalities were vastly different. Milo was a bit more ruthless than Morbius, but this didn't affect their rock-solid friendship at all. After that, they always kept in touch by letters. Time flew by, and Morbius, who was 19 years old, had grown into an excellent scholar. He successfully invented artificial blood and won the Nobel Prize. However, in his heart, all of this was just a prelude to curing his and Milo's blood diseases. In order to achieve this ultimate goal, he secretly carried out a very bold experiment without telling anyone. That was to conduct research on the genes of vampire bats, and the female assistant, Marty, was the only one who knew the secret. Morbius discovered that the saliva of vampire bats contained anticoagulants. If its genes could be integrated with human genes, perhaps it would be possible to overcome the blood disease that had plagued them for many years. Marty reminded him many times that the risks involved were huge. It was almost equivalent to taking a risk with one's life. But Morbius's determination was as firm as steel. In the end, Marty reluctantly chose to support him. But the process of the experiment was full of thorns. After the mice were injected with the gene products, they failed again and again. Morbius and Marty persevered through the long night. Finally, the number 117 reagent successfully made the mouse survive. At that moment, Morbius was overjoyed. He immediately found Milo, who had become a wealthy man and had always been his investor. Facing his close friend, Morbius chose to temporarily hide the truth of the bat experiment. He just excitedly told Milo that there was some progress on the antidote. The first stage of the experiment was successful. Next, he was going to conduct a human experiment. But Morbius also knew that the human experiment was not only illegal but also extremely risky, so it had to be carried out on the high seas. Milo didn't hesitate at all and fully supported Morbius. He quickly arranged for him and Marty to board the ship heading for the high seas. This ship was like a mixed society. Morbius and Marty were concentrating on preparing the experiment on the lower deck of the ship. On the upper deck, several big men were playing cards loudly. After carefully confirming that there was no problem with the bat gene reagent, Morbius solemnly handed it to Marty. His eyes were full of the determination of going all out. Marty's hands trembled slightly. She knew very well that the result of this injection was unpredictable, but there was no way back at this moment. The reagent had to be injected into the spinal cord, and the whole process was extremely painful. She could only hold back her inner worry and fix Morbius in place. Then she stood by and nervously waited for the judgment of fate. Soon, Morbius's body began to twitch violently. The violent noise broke the silence on the lower deck of the cabin, and reached the upper floor. A group of people playing cards on the upper floor were disturbed by this sudden noise. One of the big men rushed down with an angry face, cursing. He intended to teach these two ungrateful guys a good lesson, but just as Marty opened her mouth to explain, Morbius, who was originally still struggling, actually disappeared without a trace, as if he had evaporated from the world. An inexplicable sense of unease welled up in the big man's heart, and he and Marty began to search everywhere. When they looked up, they were all stunned by the sight in front of them. Morbius was now like a huge bat, with his limbs attached to the ceiling. His face was twisted, his fangs were exposed, and he looked extremely terrifying. The big man was so scared that his legs went weak, and he contacted his teammates to come down quickly. As soon as the words were spoken, Morbius pounced on the big man. Out of instinctive fear, Marty turned around and rushed out the door. In a panic, she closed the door with great force. Morbius had completely lost his mind at this moment. He instantly knocked the big man down, his sharp fangs pierced the man's neck, and blood gushed out. At the same time, the big man's companions rushed over with guns in their hands. Marty rushed forward in a hurry and tried to explain, but before she could say a few words, the other party knocked her unconscious. When Morbius saw that Marty was injured, a trace of madness flashed in his eyes. He let out a roar. He punched and shattered the glass beside him and leaped out. He easily dodged the bullets from several people, quickly killed them one by one, and then crazily sucked their blood. I don't know how long it had passed, but Morbius finally regained consciousness. He looked at the corpses all over the ground, and the unconscious Marty. His mind went blank. He subconsciously looked at his own body. He found that his originally thin body had now become strong and sturdy, but he couldn't remember anything about what had happened before, but only felt a deep sense of fear and panic. Morbius stood stiffly in front of the surveillance screen. His face was so pale that it was almost transparent. He looked at his terrifying appearance on the screen, his stomach churned, and he almost vomited. The truth that led to all these changes was all due to that bat gene reagent that carried hope. His eyes were full of disbelief. There had never been such a situation in the previous experiments on mice. The sudden loss of control instantly left him at a loss. Morbius picked up the phone tremblingly and dialed the emergency number. In a panic, he also took away all the remaining reagent. Then he quickly fled from this ship full of bloody memories. When the police arrived, the surveillance on the ship had been completely cleared. Marty was still unconscious. In addition to several corpses with their blood drained and distorted faces at the scene, there was only a strange paper bat left. Morbius had already returned to the laboratory. There were mixed feelings in his heart. At this time, Morbius found that the gene reagent, while bringing terrible consequences, it also gave him abilities beyond those of ordinary people. Now his endurance, speed, strength, and hearing were all far beyond those of ordinary people. He could even establish a mysterious connection with a group of bats. Not only that, but he also acquired the echolocation ability of bats. He could accurately sense everything around him. However, the price of this ability was extremely heavy. He must drink blood regularly, otherwise, he would lose his mind again. In order not to hurt the innocent, Morbius could only rely on self-made artificial blood to maintain normalcy. 1 pack of artificial blood could keep him awake and rational for 6 hours. Once the time was up, and if it wasn't replenished in time, the dark power would swallow him up again. On this day, Morbius was concentrating on testing the duration of the artificial blood in the laboratory. Milo suddenly arrived. As soon as Milo saw Morbius's radiant appearance, his eyes lit up instantly. This meant that their antidote had been made, but Morbius shook his head slowly with a solemn expression. Milo's smile froze, and his eyes were full of confusion. Morbius said that this reagent brought not only a cure, but also endless pain and danger. He couldn't let Milo become a monster like himself. Although Milo repeatedly emphasized the importance of survival, Morbius's attitude was extremely firm. In order to protect his close friend, he turned him away. When Milo left, his eyes were full of disappointment and unwillingness. The once unbreakable friendship between them quietly showed cracks. At the same time, Marty woke up in the hospital ward. 2 police officers with serious expressions walked into the ward. They were going to ask Marty about what had happened on the ship. She was flustered in her heart and subconsciously chose to hide it, saying that she couldn't remember anything. The police officers looked at each other, and could only return without success. That night, the hospital corridor was filled with a strange silence. The little nurse was carefully patrolling the ward when she was suddenly attacked. When she was found the next day, most of the blood on her body had been sucked out, and this hospital was just separated from Morbius's laboratory by a wall. When Morbius saw the tragic situation of the little nurse, an ominous premonition welled up in his heart. He suspected that he had mutated again last night, and hurt the innocent. Self-blame overwhelmed him like a tide. Morbius was afraid of hurting the innocent again, so he quickly packed his luggage, and planned to move away from this dangerous place. However, unexpectedly, Morbius met the 2 police officers who had questioned Marty halfway. The police officers had sharp eyes. They suspected that Morbius was related to the murder case on the ship. Morbius tried to make up lies to get away with it, but the police officers were experienced, and didn't fall for it at all. In desperation, Morbius knocked down the 2 police officers instantly. With his superhuman speed and strength, he rushed towards the top floor trying to escape, but the police officers reacted quickly, and soon chased after him by elevator. Morbius finally couldn't escape, and was captured by the police and put in prison. What's worse, after careful calculation in prison, Morbius was horrified to find the time that the artificial blood could maintain a normal state was getting shorter and shorter. When being questioned by the police, he was disheartened and calmly admitted the so-called guilt. Now the only thing he longed for was to get the artificial blood, to control the dark power that could break out in his body at any time. But the police ignored his request. Morbius could only helplessly curl up in the cold cell, waiting for the judgment of fate. Soon after, Milo came to visit him in prison. He looked at Morbius in the cell, and his eyes were full of distress. In his heart, Morbius had always been kind. He couldn't believe that his friend would do such a cruel thing. Milo was determined to rescue Morbius. Before leaving, he secretly left a pack of artificial blood in his own crutch. When Morbius took the crutch, a strange feeling welled up in his heart. He knew very well that as a patient with a blood disease, Milo had been walking with the help of a crutch for many years. Now he left the crutch behind, so there must be something wrong. Sure enough, when Morbius looked at Milo's leaving back, he found that his steps were extremely brisk, and there was no sign of his previous limping at all. He instantly understood that Milo must have injected the bat gene reagent. Morbius guessed that it was very likely that Milo had attacked the little nurse last night. He was deliberately framing others. Morbius was filled with disappointment in his heart. The pain of being betrayed by his friend almost drove him crazy. At this moment, the dark power in his body was stirring restlessly. He couldn't control it anymore and mutated instantly, then smashed the prison door and rushed out. He swore that he must find Milo, and ask him face to face why he was so heartless. At this time, Milo was leisurely walking on the bustling street. When passing by the newspaper stand, he casually bought a copy of the Daily Bugle. The front page headline was the news about Morbius turning into a vampire. Looking at the newspaper, a strange smile curled up on Milo's lips. However, the next second, he pounced on the newspaper vendor like a wild beast out of control. It turned out that Milo also couldn't escape the side effects of the gene reagent. He fell into a crazy mutation, and all of this was heard clearly by Morbius, who had the ability of echolocation. He quickly rushed towards the source of the sound. Soon, he stopped Milo, who was crazily attacking others. On the street, when Milo saw Morbius, a strange smile appeared on his face. He admitted his actions without hesitation. In Milo's view, the blood-sucking ability brought by the gene reagent wasn't a disaster, but an evolution. He couldn't understand why Morbius resisted it. He also hoped that Morbius could let go of his obsession and accept this new life calmly like him. Morbius looked at his former close friend, who was once so familiar but now so strange. There were mixed feelings in his heart. He knew that an inevitable showdown between him and Milo was about to unfold, and the result of this showdown would determine the fate of them, and even more people. In the noisy streets of the city, the two had an instant conflict due to their different views. They grappled with each other. The chaotic figures moved all the way from the street to the subway station. The latent brutal factor in Milo's character was completely unleashed at this moment. Compared with Morbius, he was even more brutal. In the intense conflict, the police officers who came to maintain order unfortunately became the victims of his anger. Milo actually beat the police officer to death, and the scene was in chaos. In the depths of Morbius's heart, he wasn't enthusiastic about fighting. In this chaos, he began to concentrate on feeling the flow of the air. Strangely enough, under this concentration, he gradually mastered the ability to fly. Morbius quickly left this bloody scene, along the direction of the railway tracks. When the two police officers rushed to the scene, Milo had already disappeared without a trace. The people who didn't know the truth were misled by the chaos at the scene. They mistakenly thought that it was Morbius who had killed the police officer. At this time, Marty became the key figure. As Morbius's assistant, she naturally attracted the attention of the police officers. The police officers originally planned to secretly monitor her, trying to find Morbius's whereabouts through her. However, Marty was extremely vigilant and soon noticed something was wrong. She cleverly got rid of the police officers who were tailing her. After that, on the crowded bus, Marty accidentally met the disguised Morbius. Morbius explained the whole story to her in detail. Marty knew Morbius's character very well. She resolutely chose to believe in him, and was willing to continue to help him get out of trouble. So they came to a hidden coffee shop. Morbius told Marty his plan. He hoped that Marty could help get back the artificial blood. In the laboratory, while they were talking, two suspicious gangsters walked into the coffee shop. These two people were engaged in the underground drug trafficking business, and this meant that they were likely to have a laboratory. Morbius was in urgent need of a laboratory at present, to make the antidote for the bat gene reagent. At that moment, he decided to intimidate these gangsters. Morbius showed a powerful aura. After some intimidation, he successfully scared the gangsters away. In this way, Morbius got a simple laboratory. Marty considered that her home was no longer safe, so she moved to the laboratory with her beloved cat, ready to face the upcoming challenges together with Morbius. On the other side, after getting away from the scene, Milo became more and more arrogant. In a lively bar, he met a girl who caught his eye. However, the pleasant atmosphere didn't last long. Several gangsters came to make trouble without knowing the situation. One of them even punched Milo. The anger in Milo's heart instantly flared up, but because there were many people in the bar and it was easy to be noticed, he held back and didn't lash out on the spot. Afterwards, in a relatively desolate place, Milo found an opportunity for revenge. He ruthlessly killed the gangster who had him before, but Milo didn't expect that there was a surveillance camera installed in this place. After the two police officers checked the surveillance video, they found that the perpetrator wasn't Morbius, but they couldn't identify Milo's identity for a while. In desperation, they could only release the screenshots of the surveillance video to the media and offer a reward, hoping to find the perpetrator in this way. Soon, the director of that orphanage at that time saw the news. The director was very familiar with Milo and Morbius. He recognized them at a glance. Although the director couldn't get in touch with Morbius, he knew Milo's address. Out of concern, the director decided to go and visit Milo. However, at this time, Milo had become sensitive and irritable. He firmly believed that the director favored Morbius, but in fact, the director loved every child. Milo was even someone he had personally raised. How could he be partial? But at this moment, Milo wouldn't listen to any explanation at all. In a fit of rage, he even beat the director. At this time, Morbius knew nothing about all of this. He was concentrating on making poison in the laboratory. After some efforts, he successfully made 2 doses of the reagent. The ingredients in this poison could kill vampire bats. It could also pose a fatal threat to himself and Milo. Morbius knew very well that he didn't have much time left. The long-term anxiety made him feel extremely exhausted. In his view, death might be a kind of liberation. Although Marty was full of reluctance in her heart, she couldn't interfere with the decision made by Morbius. Then he took the reagent and prepared to set out to find Milo. Just then, Morbius received a call from the director. The director only managed to say the name Milo with great difficulty. Morbius instantly realized that something was wrong, and rushed to the director's home. However, the director was already seriously injured. He only left the word stop and then closed his eyes forever. Morbius immediately understood that this must have been done by Milo, but he couldn't imagine that Milo was so brutal as to kill the person who had raised him. Then Morbius heard the voice of Milo threatening Marty. He then realized that he had fallen into a trap. Morbius quickly expanded the range of his ability to identify the position by sound. With his super ability, he successfully locked onto Milo's position, but when he arrived at the scene, what he saw was that Marty's neck was cut through. Marty used her last bit of strength, hoping that Morbius would feed his blood to her, because she knew that the bat gene reagent could be transmitted through blood. After using the gene, she might be able to obtain a super self-healing ability. In an emergency situation, Morbius had to do as she asked. However, to Morbius's great grief, after drinking the blood, Marty didn't wake up but gradually stopped breathing. Filled with grief and indignation, Morbius found Milo. This time, he was no longer merciful. Milo seemed very satisfied when he saw Morbius's angry appearance. He thought that violence was an expression of accepting evolution calmly. Although the abilities they obtained were comparable, Milo wasn't worried, because he knew that Morbius hadn't drunk human blood for a long time. His physical strength couldn't keep up with his own. In the fight, Morbius soon fell into a disadvantage and almost fell to his death. At a critical moment, the 2 doses of poison that Morbius carried with him played a role. Then Morbius emitted sound waves and summoned a large group of vampire bats. He directed them to launch an attack on Milo, and successfully repelled. Morbius took the opportunity to step forward, and stabbed the poison into Milo's body. Milo began to regret it only when death was imminent, but it was all too late. In fact, the name Milo was given to him by Morbius. His real name was not like that. Even though they later became enemies, Milo had never rejected this name. This shows that in his heart, he had never really had the intention to kill Morbius. And Morbius had once promised Milo to live and die together, but in the end, he chose to face everything alone. This also became a barrier to their complex emotions. At the end of the film, Marty woke up. Her scarlet eyes indicated that she was likely to have mutated into a vampire. What kind of story will be waiting for her in the future? Everything is unknown. The movie ends here. The whole film uses a dark tone. The effect creation is excellent, the director skillfully integrates high-intensity violence and a gothic atmosphere to bring a unique viewing experience. It is gripping until the end. The protagonist performs the transformation from a scientist to a superpowered person, and the performance in the inner struggle is also very good. At the same time, the visual effects help to present a very shocking effect, but the plot is a bit cliched. In essence, it is a story of a crazy scientist, but it turns into a story where a genius scientist becomes a vampire who sucks human blood in order to cure his illness. This kind of plot has already been performed many times. The action scenes are a bit chaotic and can't bring the audience a pleasant experience. It deeply explores the themes contained in the movie, such as scientific ethics issues. The protagonist conducts a dangerous experiment to cure the disease, breaking the boundaries of human ethics and bringing unknown consequences. It also explores the theme of identity. After becoming a superpowered person, he is confused about whether he is a human or a monster, but the fly in the ointment is that the plot is a bit sketchy. Although the movie has its shortcomings, it has also expanded the characters in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, exploring the concept of superheroes with a rather dim protagonist, adding a new perspective to the Sony Marvel Cinematic Universe. But generally speaking, it's still worth watching. Friends who are interested can watch the original film, Morbius. If you like this video, you might as well like, comment, and subscribe. More wonderful movies. Let's meet in the next video.